never know where this is on. I think we are on. Hi, everybody. So we are back for our fortnightly live. So you have got myself, Kelly Swingler, and my partner in crime, the fabulous Laura. Hey, Laura.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
How are you? How's where you are today?
So there's a lot going on in U.S. politics this week. We have our massive election next week. We had our Supreme Court nomination confirmed last night. So there's a lot going on in the news. I'm trying to remain empathetic and curious, trying to live my values this morning, but it's a little challenging. Doing my best, trying to just stay positive and encourage people to vote and to just try to vote with their values, which is what we always preach about in HR.
Yeah.
I always say voting is the biggest hiring decision we're going to make in 2020. So we should probably do it properly and really, think it through. It's a lot going on, but we're doing it. And
there is. And we'll keep fingers crossed. Like I said, we'll keep fingers crossed for the right decisions.
Yeah, and I always say if anyone is still on the fence or wants to understand why voting might be a good idea, I'm happy to talk to anyone. I don't want to rule out. I really want to create an inclusive space for people to talk it through. I'm trying not to judge. So, if anyone wants to talk it out, you can message me. But it is important that everyone over the age of 18 vote. I mean, it's really, that's what this is about. It's the power that we have.
Yeah. Well, let's keep fingers crossed, and let's do our weather check. So across the pot, like what's the weather? So we've got beautiful autumn here, and I think I saw over the weekend you were walking through some lovely autumnal leaves.
Yeah. No, we actually, same here. October's always a great month. We don't have like a ton of sun this week. It's kind of that weird like in between. There's a little sun now, but yeah, it's that crisp air. Great vegetables in season, cauliflower and squash and Brussels sprouts. It's just kind of that fun change of, I like fall. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, me too. My favorite, one of my favorite season, I think.
Yeah.
Although I do miss the kind of warmth of the summer. But I love the colours and stuff this time of year. I think it's
getting settled into the new house. Does it feel like home yet?
Yeah, it does. So considering we've only really been in like just over a week, so a week last Saturday, it is starting to feel like home. So we still have no internet,
right?
Which is having its challenges. We're still waiting on a few pieces of like just final kind of furnishings, like a few pictures, few curtains, all those sorts of things. But other than that, it feels good. And I think the fact that so we're now like in the middle of nowhere, but like dog walking first thing in the morning is just amazing because there's just nothing. It's just like fields. We go down a dirt track. Myself and the dog come back absolutely filthy, like covered in mud every morning. But it's fab.
Yeah, you have to send me pictures of that.
Yeah, I will. So it's feeling like home. So yeah, thank you. So today we said we would talk about the power of words.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, where do we start? Like there's so much to cover on this one and so much that we could talk about. But
let's tell people why. Let's talk about why we thought that words are so important. Because I think people might think like, why does it matter what words we use?
Yeah, good. So I suppose from my perspective with what we were talking about, I think there are some words that we can use that disempower us, where it's like we give up all of our control. We give over control with some of those words. And I think some of it is subconscious, isn't it? Like we don't necessarily realize that some of the words that we're using, that we are doing that. So I think from my perspective, it is, I suppose, taking back some of that power, being conscious of some of the language and some of the words that we are using, making sure that we can be more positive in the way in which, because again, like whatever we say, we hear. Right. So it's not just like talking to other people. Whatever we're saying, we hear ourselves. So that, and I suppose then it becomes that kind of self-talk and how we're talking to ourselves and how we're talking to others. So I suppose, from my perspective, it is the power of words whereby we can take back some of that personal power, start to use maybe some more empowering language, and see where that takes us. What about
Yeah.
from your perspective?
Yeah, I agree. I love this idea that we hear what we say. It's, it's like kind of the age old, do we take our own advice? Like, I feel like I give great advice and I seldom take it, right? That's classic Alice in Wonderland. But yeah, I think for me too, what I'm noticing is like we're surviving a pandemic, we're surviving a global crisis, a crazy election, civil unrest, racial unrest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like all we have is our communication with each other. And it
Yeah.
feels like I studied communications in college. I love language. I love words. But I don't think I've realized until maybe the last month or so how powerful it is to think about how we're speaking to each other, how we're tweeting, how we're emailing, how we're communicating. And like I'm just so much more aware now of what's being said to me and what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And just really trying to think about, is it said with empathy? Is it said with compassion? Is it, yeah, to your point, is it empowering us or is it deflating us? There's also this kind of notion I'm thinking a lot about around toxic positivity. Like, are we being too positive where we're not making room for talking about how hard it is? So there's just so much around words where I realize like we have to think about what we're actually saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just what you said there around that kind of toxic positivity. So I think some of the conversations, before we kind of get into some of our words, but I think some of the conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks, and I know we both seem to have endless conversations with people, don't we? And it's like, oh, there's a learning and there's a learning. But I've been having some of the conversations that I've been having over the last couple of weeks, and I think the best word I could use to describe it, and I'm not sure if it was necessarily the right phrase, the right words for it, but I'm getting a sense that some of us at the moment are in this, what I can only describe as like survivor's guilt, whereby there has been all of this stuff going on this year. We have seen some organizations that have just fallen flat on their faces. We have seen some people that are losing jobs. We have seen people that have lost income overnight. We have seen people that are struggling in their homes and all of those sorts of things. And yet, for those of us that have been able to, for the most part, stay positive, be surrounded by family and friends, have income coming through, no matter, it may not be the targets that we'd set for this year, but still be in a position where we're able to have that. And I think for some of us, we're in that kind of survivor's guilt mode. It's like we feel bad. Like if I suddenly say to you, Stella, oh my God, like, today, like, I just feel awful, right? All of this stuff that's going on, it's starting to feel too heavy. It's too much. It's, it's kind of all of this stuff. But it's almost like I don't feel, and lots of people, I think this is what I've been picking up in the conversations, like people don't want to say I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Because compared to lots of other people, they're not, right? Their businesses are thriving, or they're in organizations that are thriving. They are, they've got amazing support networks around them. They've got money coming in. They've got food on the table every month. They've got all of this stuff. And so it's kind of like they feel even more that they've just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing.
Right.
Because if they say, I'm exhausted, I'm fed up, I've had enough, I can't deal with this anymore, it's almost like, but all those people over there then that have lost jobs or homes or any of that sort of stuff, like it's taking away from some of them. And so that toxic positivity, I think both ends of that spectrum can be really dangerous. Like if we are at breaking point and not talking about it, that's going to have an impact on us. And even if things on the outside seem to be going okay, but we're not talking about how we're feeling emotionally and psychologically and all of those sorts of things, ultimately that's going to have a knock-on effect of us. And I think we've got to try and find that balance. So from a language perspective, from a words perspective, I think some of that is just accepting where we are, and no matter how I feel today or how you feel today, being able to talk about how we both feel.
Yeah.
With
judgment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, yes, there's all this, all this stuff going on, but yeah, if you're feeling it today, like I want to be able to help you with that. Yeah. If I'm feeling it tomorrow, I know you would help me with that.
Yeah.
And so wherever we are at the minute, I think we've got to accept that that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to be sharing more of with one another.
Yeah, I mean, the root of survivor's guilt is comparison. And I think comparison is one of the most toxic traps we get into when we communicate, especially in business. Like, I have had so many people over the last 6 months bragging to me, and I try to remind myself this is their own survivor's guilt playing out in a way that's actually, it's really bizarre in a sense. Like, I'll hear people say, well, I know the world outside is crazy, but you know, my mortgage is paid off. My husband makes a ton of money. We have a house in the Hamptons. We're doing great. And I listen to it and I hear bragging. I hear arrogance. But of course, it's probably not based on that. It's probably based on insecurity and feeling like shameful and feeling all the things Brene Brown teaches us around shame. But like, it's like, what words are we saying then? Like, are we bragging or like showing off the right approach to show empathy? I mean, to me, it doesn't work. And comparison doesn't work on the flip side. To try and like belittle our experience or to try to hide it, that doesn't work either. It's like to say we're all, you know, you and I have talked about this analogy that we love. It's like, or the metaphor that we're all in the same water, but in different boats. Like, we don't have to change our boat. We don't have to suddenly start to pity ourselves and or brag about it. It's just, it's different, but like, we're all in this crazy, wild water together.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly, you know, we have said that, haven't we? Like, you know, some of us are sailing across on yachts, and some of us are, you know, kind of bouncing across waters in rubber dinghies that need kind of patching up every 5 minutes. And that's our boat. Like, that's our reality. That doesn't mean that we can't say it's hard. That doesn't mean we can't say it's tough. That doesn't mean we can't say it's challenging. But we've got to recognize, we are going through it in very, very different circumstances.
All right, let's get into some of the words. So Kelly and I wrote down words
you go first, because I know you've got a list and I know I've got a list, and I'm sure some of them will be the same. So I'm just going to tick mine off, but you pick a word first.
So Kelly and I were talking about, like, let's just write down words that have been annoying us or like we noticed lately that are coming up a lot. So one for me is, because I'm very big on empathy during this time, right? So I feel like, you know, my value is based on human dignity and equity and inclusion. And I just believe that we all have a voice. So the phrase that's been really pissing me off, pardon my frankness, is I can't imagine how hard it would be to be single in a pandemic. I can't imagine how hard it would be to be a New Yorker in a pandemic. I can't imagine owning a business in a pandemic. It's the least empathetic thing you can say. You can say, I can imagine that would be difficult. But to say I can't imagine tells me that you have no interest in imagining it. You're pushing me away. You're basically saying, that must suck.
Yeah.
And so I'm really aware of it now. And so now I try to say to people when they say it, like, okay, do you want to imagine it with me? Do you want me to tell you more about it? Do you want to learn more? Or is it just too painful to even, because like, we're not going to see each other if we say, I can't imagine being a Black man right now. I can't imagine being a Republican right now. I can't imagine, like, try to imagine, try to understand, try to go there with someone. And it's so vulnerable, but if we have to,
and that, like you said, that's the empathy side of it, isn't it? Right. Let's talk it through together. Let me try and understand where you are. Let's have an honest conversation about how you are feeling. You know,
but let me learn more.
Is any of what you've just said difficult, or is it because it's so far away from my reality? Actually, no, I can't imagine what that would be like, but I do want to get in that with you. So tell me what it's like for you.
But even like, you think of it in business terms, like I've heard it within HR. So somebody might say, I can't imagine doing employee relations all day. Well, you've just dismissed the employee relations person. Like that, so you can't imagine it. It's so awful. You can't even picture it. How that doesn't leave room for curiosity. That doesn't leave room for learning. It doesn't leave room for empathy and respect. It's basically shutting it down.
Yeah.
So I have like other phrases like that I've heard since I heard that. It's like, I don't understand how. I don't understand how you could focus on recruiting all day. I don't understand how you could just do L&D. I can't imagine. Oh, it's like this very kind of, the other phrase that comes up like that is like, oh, really? Not in my experience. Like, that's not something I experience or I handle. And it's just very kind of like, it just creates a barrier. So I'm always curious about language that's creating a barrier instead of actually opening it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I can't imagine. There we go. That's our first one to start off. So I think then one for me is, and I suppose there's a few bits around this for me, but I think one is when we are like genuinely like how are you?
Yeah.
And I think I have, over the last few weeks, I've become even more, I don't know, annoyed, frustrated, however it is that we want to call it, by the kind of how are you? And I still ask it. I think I asked you earlier, like, how are you? Right. But I think when I genuinely want to know how you are. What I'm noticing, though, when we are asking people, how are you, is we're getting responses like good, okay, and fine.
Yeah.
And good, okay, and fine, like they're not emotions, they're not descriptors.
Right.
They don't really explain anything. So I tried a couple of weeks ago with like testing some of these and actually like what's on your mind currently.
Yeah.
Like what's challenging you at the moment, what's difficult for you at the moment, what can I help with? But I think we've kind of, I suppose from my perspective, like don't for me, and I there's just so much out there, and I suppose again this is kind of two-way, but if it's like how are you, I wouldn't ask anybody that if I didn't want to be like ready for whatever was going to come back. Right. So actually, Kelly, today, today is awful. Right. Okay, let's talk about it. But I do think we have got to the point of just like, how are you? Are you okay? Are you all right today? I think we've kind of put it in as like some sort of almost just like an empty kind of conversation starter. It's like, do you really want to know or not? And then I think because we don't believe that people mean it when they're asking us, that's when we come out with a good, okay, and fine.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see flipped the kind of how are you to like what is on your mind? What's your biggest challenge this week? What's worrying you at the moment? Can I help you with anything at the minute? Something that just has a bit more meaning, a bit more kind of heartfelt, coming back to again what we said from a kind of values perspective. All of those sorts of things. Like I genuinely want to know.
Yeah.
But if my question is going to kind of shut you up and shut you down, then how can I open that up a little bit more? Let's have some proper kind of open dialogue.
Yeah. So I just jotted down a couple of notes as you were talking. So what I have been doing, I don't mind. I think the problem is this. It's the context. So the question, how are you, is not, it's a benign question. I mean, it's totally fine. The problem is usually in the tone that it's asked. So sometimes we get the, how are you? Automatically you want a good answer. You're not interested in, it's said with like, wee, right? Or it's, how are you? Which is also like, again, maybe someone's in an ecstatic mood. So I think it's okay to say, I've been doing this more, I think, as well. How are you? Great. You great. Okay, if you're interested, I'm happy to start again and ask you how you're doing, and we can have an open dialogue. And usually the other person's like, oh, that'd be so great. Okay. Or I'll say, because I notice we all do it out of habit. It's just like, well, how are you? Are you interested in even talking about it? And nah, not today. Okay. Actually, I'd love to. Just like kind of taking that question and expanding it with some context. Like, I'm curious, like you can say to people, like, I'm curious to ask you how you're doing, and I really want to hear the answer. Are you open to talking about it?
Yeah.
Some don't want to.
Yeah.
Some really are desperate to. They just don't know that somebody is willing to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the second piece, I think, is how we respond when someone says the answer. So, like, I find if I tell someone, so it's brave, okay? It's brave and vulnerable to say how you're really feeling. So if I'm having a day where I'm overwhelmed or if I'm just frustrated with the state of the world and I say, yeah, today's a tough day. Sometimes people, because they're so uncomfortable with that, will say, oh no, why? Or like, it's kind of this like, really frightened response. Like they don't want to, like, make it stop. And then I find we're just kind of, we're not getting anywhere. So I think when you ask, how are you, it's important to have the context, making sure both of you are prepared to talk about it. And if you're not, don't even ask it. But then be prepared for an answer that you may not want to hear. And like, try not to dismiss that person with language when they say it.
Yeah.
It happens so often, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How can I help? That sounds awful. Right? And that's not very comforting when someone just might want to hear like, oh, I understand. We want to feel heard and seen, right? So just saying to someone, I get it. I hear you. I know how that feels. That's very different than like, ooh, I can't imagine. That must suck.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah.
And we hear it all the time because we're all afraid. So it's like these walls. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun thing to practice. Yeah. The simple act of saying, how are you? Answering it and then responding to that answer. There is an art to that.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Right, go with your next one. I'm going to take you for a little walk whilst I put some lights on.
Okay, I'm trying to see. So many of you kind of. So I had done a video last week that you had seen, and this was sort of, again, in the comparison line, but I talked about how I hear a lot like, "Oh, you're one of the good ones."
Yeah.
In recruiting, so people will say, "Oh, I talked to so many recruiters; they're all terrible, but you're an exception. You're one of the good ones." And I was saying in my video how I feel like that's obviously meant as a compliment, but what ends up happening is that I feel like my whole profession has been judged because I'm an exception. You had messaged me to say, wow, I didn't think of it as a comparison. And like comparative language is so dangerous. And I thought, exactly, like if someone's really exceptional at something, just compliment them for that. Don't compare them to the group. Like you wouldn't say, like, okay, we joke, okay, maybe Brits have a reputation of always being polite. So I wouldn't say like, oh, you're so candid. It's so nice. You're such an exception to the rule in British culture. Like that's really dismissing all of your British colleagues. It's not true. You are candid. You know, you do believe in candor. Period. So like, I just think we can compliment each other without tying us into an entire group and boxing us in.
Yeah, and I had box in my head as you were talking about that. So I think for years I have been a massive believer in like we have to stop boxing people. Yeah. We have to stop assuming that every recruiter is the same, every HR person is the same, every woman is the same, every American is the same, every Brit is the same. I get kind of quite annoyed with lots of data. Right. So people will, whether I'm kind of reading it in books or whether I'm kind of looking at it in white papers or whatever, I can get quite frustrated with data because it's all, 64% of people said this. And I'm like, right, well, I'm not one of those 64%. Like I wouldn't have agreed with that.
Yeah.
And I think whenever I kind of see those statistics, I'm always sat on the outside of it. But I do think that is like, it is a tactic. It's a I get it with data, data is data, statistics are statistics. But I think lots of people just want to, it's easier to tick a box. It's easier to say, this is the recruiter box, this is the HR box, this is the consultant box, this is the coach box, and everybody is the same. Whereas again, like you are a good person. If I can say, you are a good person, that's specifically to you. But to your point about, you're one of the good like you're one of the only good recruiters out there. That is demeaning to everybody else that's doing it. There are lots of good recruiters out there. There are lots of good everybody.
Language of like disempowering or devaluing, like you were saying, that's such a hot button for you right now, and I agree. And I think the way we compliment each other matters. I learned from my friend Sarah Noel Wilson. She said, you can compliment just as a fact, like you are brave, you are strong, you are great. You don't have to say, I think you are, I feel you are, because in your world, and it's so much more empowering to say that to someone. So I think it's really important that we don't tie compliments into this Like, we don't make them convoluted. They can just be, yeah, you're an exceptional strategic HR pro. How powerful would that be to hear for someone versus, gosh, compared to all the other HR people I've had, you're really the best. That's what almost every strategic HR pro has heard. But that's
well, it does,
not
and it
powerful.
brings it down a level, doesn't it? So basically it says you're all crap,
but
you're kind of top of the crap pile.
Exactly.
Whereas it doesn't it, and it's, you know, and that kind of, you know, that comment that you got to get about recruiters, it's like, well, all recruiters are crap, but you're kind of at the top of that pile, Laura. Like, go you.
I know. It's wild, and I can't, like, exactly. And so lately, I'm not letting people off the hook so easy anymore. Like, when I'm hearing, and I think we all should be empowered to do this. When we hear these words and they strike us, whether it's to us, to our community, to our views, like, we have to challenge them. So sometimes I'll say to people, like, what do you mean by that? What has your experience been? Like, let's just, and I'll take one for the team and defend my entire profession again. But, like, we have to, right? Because, all right, you go next.
Okay, so I've got a list of just words, but I think one that that we were just talking about actually before we kind of came live is this kind of notion, like the word leader.
Yep.
Or the word leadership.
Yeah, get ready, people. We had a real serious convo.
I don't want to kind of bring down the mood. I've then got lots of other just little words that I want to kind of bin and some that I would like to see change. But I think where Laura and I, so if Laura doesn't kind of mind me sharing, so I had sent an email just earlier, like, how are you? And it was, you know, I've just watched the news. I'm okay. It's a bit crap.
Yeah.
And so like,
we are exhausted here in the United States.
Yeah. But this word leader, and I did just post a video about an hour or so ago. But I think we've got to be really careful when we're talking about leader and leadership, because I think what we are seeing more and more of at the moment are people that are in positions of power that are not leaders, that are not displaying leadership, that are not doing or being or living as leaders. There is no values based, there's no clarity, there's no empathy, there's no understanding, there's no emotional intelligence, there's none of what we would kind of look at from a leadership, you know, if we were doing like the dictionary of leadership behaviors, right, like that whole checklist of things that said, like, these are the skills and attributes and values and qualities of leaders. And so I think we've got to be really careful. I think what we have a lot of are people that are in positions of power, but they are not leaders and they are not displaying leadership. And so I think we need to be really careful as individuals and within our organizations, and when we then look more widely, where we are just readily kind of throwing out the word leader.
Yep.
Because for me, a leader, like I've always said it, you know, I think we see leaders throughout school, throughout kindergarten, school, education, colleges, sports teams, book clubs, you know, through every kind of wake of life, we see leaders. And again, I think what we are seeing, you know, you mentioned Brené Brown earlier, like for her, for us, like for me, she's up there in terms of leader. In the UK, we've seen like Marcus Rashford, that's doing everything that he possibly can at the moment to kind of ensure that, like, no kids are going hungry and all of this sort of stuff. Like, we've got Abby Wambach, we've got the Simon Sinek. You know, there are incredible, amazing people out there. They may not be in positions of power, but they are leaders. And I just think we've got to be really, really careful when we're throwing out this title of leader and the word of leader, that we're not getting that confused with somebody that's in a position of power.
Yeah, completely. And you've made a really good point, which is we always preach about, you know, being values led. So you and I are very values led as the CEO of our businesses. We are values led in how we live our lives. And we, I guess, assume, or I certainly assume, that every person in power does the same thing, that they lead through values. what I'm learning is that they may very well do that. It's just their values may completely misalign with mine.
Yeah.
And so then I have to say, oh, okay. So like, it's funny. I think I've shown this to you that I was given this hat, my empathy hat. And how do I get it? Woo! This was given to me by a student of one of my webinars when I said, we have to put our empathy hat on. So I have been putting my empathy hat on to try and understand
it does suit you. It does suit you. Yeah.
So I've been trying to understand the other side of politics in my country right now. And I've really tried to look at it with empathy. And I've realized some of the values are just misaligned with mine, but they're there, right? So to like value money and greed, or the acquisition of wealth over helping others, or the value of personal property over the environment, like those are values. They're just not my values. So to your point, that's not my leader has to reflect my values. It's like, just like in a company, and I tell candidates this all the time, if you're joining a new organization, you want to make sure your values are aligned with that CEO's values.
Yeah.
So it's the same in government. It's the same in anything where there's someone at the top of the pyramid. It's like their values just may be totally misaligned with yours. And that's empowering for you to make change. It's empowering for you to do things differently. And so, I guess I've learned, because a lot of my peers are like, they have no values, like they have zero. I'm like, no, I think they actually do. It's just so different than ours. It's like hard to see it.
You don't recognize it. Yeah.
Like exactly. It's more of oh, right. Like I have worked in companies that like just so different than my values, but other people love it. It's like, no, they want that. They want.
Yeah.
It's just so, it's an interesting time. So I think you're right. When we use words, like if we bring empathy into the word leadership, we can see it more clearly, I think.
Yeah. But also I think like just the word values.
Yeah.
Right. And again, coming back to your point that you made just there, but also when you were kind of coming back to what was the word you said earlier, like toxic positivity or
it's
something
a good one
like
to
that.
Google.
And again, I think sometimes, even just the word value sometimes, again, I think we have to be very careful in the context that we're using it, because you and I will both say, right, we're values led, we're values driven, we lead from our values, all of those sorts of things. And it's like, oh yeah, I can really see that in you. We have similar values. But again, as you said, that's not to say that somebody else that may be working for money or greed or status or, I don't know, wealth or, any
Power.
of those sorts of things, power, any of those sorts of things, that doesn't mean they don't have values.
Those are their values.
They value something different, and I don't recognize it, or you don't recognize it in them. And I don't know any organization that doesn't have values.
Yep.
But again, we always assume that those values should be positive,
or
trust,
our own,
respect,
right?
empathy. Exactly. Whereas there are some organizations out there, again, we could probably name lots and lots of them. They may have words on the wall that are like trust, respect, empathy, whatever. Actually, what they value is, killing themselves for 18 hours a day, earning as much money as possible, going out and like getting drunk every night, or, kind of, I don't know, taking drugs or whatever, and then kind of going back to it and doing another 18-hour day tomorrow. Like, they're not talking about that, but that's what they value. So I think
we could have that on their wall.
Yeah. We just respect long hours,
I would
drinking,
love it.
drugs, and just earning shitloads of money.
Totally.
Like, just say it like it is.
I would actually think that's that's so aligned with my values of transparency. I'd be like, good for them. Like they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, no illusion here. We're here for the money, the drugs, and the women. Like, just put it on the wall.
Yeah. But where they lose us is where they're saying trust, respect, and then they're not showing it, because what they're showing is money hungry, power hungry, all of that sort of stuff. Just say it as it is.
Exactly, because you and I really don't like hypocrisy. It's very confusing.
No, so don't tell me it's all about trust and respecting each other.
Exactly.
When what you mean is name calling, banter, beating each other up, not talking about each other. And even just as I'm talking now, I've got like like Leonardo DiCaprio, like the Wolf of Wall Street, like that's
Yeah.
popping into my head. Like when you think about like the values, you know, we created, I can't remember all of the words, but like all of these words, and it was about money, power, and drugs.
Yeah. He at least kind of owns it in that movie, right? I mean, there's
exactly. Yeah, he's not
no
shying away
illusion.
from it, is he? Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally good, and it's really important to question these things. And yeah, I mean, if you're a CEO of a company who doesn't really value kindness and empathy and all that stuff's too soft for you, then just own it. But then, like, when you're hiring people, let them know it's pretty cutthroat. We're competitive. We're not really collaboration. Like, there are people who will work for that. That's what I mean. Like, it doesn't. Our way is not the right way. Our way is what we really believe. But there are plenty of people who I'm sure watch us and are like, they're too nice, they're too kind. Like, great. There's so many perks you can go off.
Absolutely. Right, give us another word.
So I learned a new word on Twitter, thanks to this woman named Susie Benoit, and she said overfunctioner, which I think is a psychological term for, and you and I are overfunctioners, so it's hard for me to explain it to us because I feel like it's the blind leading the blind here with this, but it's basically people who are very ambitious, type A, driven, and we tend to want to fix problems for other people. So there's like the underfunctioners who they don't feel this pull, but we're like, oh, there's a crisis to 2020, we're rising to the occasion. We will fix it. We will help. We will solve.
Yeah.
And so on that point, I have noticed certain words triggering me lately. Like people will say, oh, back in the city yet? Has business started coming back yet? Is it still slow? Is it still hard? And I hear still and yet, still and yet. So I wrote down still and yet. And I realized that they connect to this idea of overfunctioning. Because if you tell an overfunctioner, you still haven't done something or you haven't done something yet, we feel like I'm on top of it. I'm doing everything I can. And it's almost this idea of time, like, are we putting pressure on each other to have done something yet, to have still not done something? And like, can we be kinder to each other and to ourselves to say, like, there's no timeline right now in 2020 for so many things. Like, so whenever I hear someone ask me still or yet, I sort of push it back on them. Like, can we talk about why you're asking me that phrase? Like, just like, is Manhattan back to normal yet? Like, I am not in control of Manhattan coming back to normal. It upsets me that it's not back yet. What is the point of that question? Like, what are we? Like, I want to dig deeper. So yeah, it's a little complex, but still and yet have been really bugging me.
But again, I get that, because again, as an overfunctioner, as a high performer, it is that, like, overachievers, overfunctioners, high performers, we don't necessarily have boundaries. Like we don't necessarily have goals, because it's like, okay, I've achieved that one and now I'm onto this one and now I'm onto this one and now I'm onto this one. So it can be almost kind of that constant going, that, like, you know, 500 miles an hour, and now I'm 501 miles an hour, and now I'm 600 miles an hour, and so the still and yet is okay. Like, what should I be doing more of? Okay, so how can I, and again, like, we've had so many conversations this year, haven't it? It's like, at the minute we are doing what we can do.
Yeah,
it's out of our control. We can't do anything. We just keep, and I've used a couple of words there actually that I want to pick up on in a minute, and there's another one. We keep going. we keep doing all that we can do. So for anybody, are you still doing that? Have you not done this yet? Have you not? It's like, I'm really trying, but I will do it. I will do it. Like,
if I said to you, if I was like, Kelly, have you unpacked all your boxes yet? Like, you'd feel that pull of like, of course I have. I did it the first day. Like,
I have, yeah. They're all unpacked.
But if you hadn't yet, and I asked you, it's going to piss you off because you're already putting pressure on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the words
and
that
last
like
week
add pressure
nearly killed me. Yeah, last week nearly killed me. So again, if we use that as an example, so we moved it. So I'd been in this house for 7 days before we moved, decorating, and I decorated 7 rooms almost single-handedly with a little bit of help kind of here and there. We moved in last Saturday. By Sunday, everything was unpacked. And then I spent the last week, again, no internet, trying to do everything that I could do, trying to keep going, trying to get the stuff done. It came to the weekend, like I was wiped out. I was wiped out for that reason. I didn't want loads of boxes.
Yeah.
There was no timeline. If we'd have had boxes still in the house that were unpacked until Christmas, like that's fine. It's clearly stuff that we don't need a lot of. It's, it's all that kind of stuff. In my head, we have now moved in. I now need to unpack all of these boxes.
Right.
I now need to get all of this stuff done. The only person that was putting pressure on me to do that was me.
Yeah.
And that is that overachiever, high performing, high functioning, got to get it done, got to get it right, all of that sort of stuff. Nobody in the house would have cared if we'd have still had boxes. Nobody.
Right. I think this, I mean, I'm sure you have heard this so many times in your life. I hear it all the time. I heard it last week from two good friends. God, you put so much pressure on yourself, right? I mean, I'm the recipient of that line all the time. So for me to hear words like yet or still, they're like, come on, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why when we speak to each other, someone may not know that I'm an overachiever in our conversation, but it's still language to think about because there are probably so many people we're talking to in the HR community who are overfunctioners, who are overachievers. Yeah. And if you ask them, have you found a job yet? Have you, still, you're already adding just comfort to them, like, and maybe not add more to the plate.
Well, it is, isn't it? How's your job search going is very different to have you found a job yet. Have you found a job yet is like you're failing at your job search. Yes. What's wrong with you?
You haven't done
your job search. Yeah. How is your job search going is much more open. The question, like you said, are you back in New York City yet? Like, how are you feeling about still being away from New York? That's a very different question.
Nobody has asked me that other than you and maybe one other person. Nobody has asked me, like, I have heard so many, I can't imagine being a New Yorker, but I very rarely has somebody said, like, how has it been as a New Yorker? It's almost like, it's true. It's harder for people to ask that. How is a job search in 2020? It's harder to ask than, found a job yet? Like, it's like we're not making room to hear the story, the narrative, the feeling. And if we're HR professionals and talent acquisition professionals and we're too scared to have open conversations, I'm really concerned. It's like we have to.
It comes back to that empathy again, though, doesn't it? If I ask you a question, are you back in New York? Like, that could be like flyaway comment. Like, I don't really care. Right. I don't really care where you are. And actually you can answer that with a yes, no, and we can move on to the next thing. But at least I have shown you that I care enough because I've asked you the question. Whereas, how are you feeling still being away from New York? That's I really want to know what it's like for you. I really want to know how you're feeling. How has it been not being in your home this year? How has it been staying with your parents, as a grown adult, how that's a meaningful conversation. In order for me to ask you those questions, they're really, from your perspective, will either be I don't really want to talk about it today, or there is a meaningful conversation. So again, just the way in which we ask the question, I always kind of say, it's the powerful questions that will give us the powerful answers.
But are people prepared for the powerful answers? That's maybe the problem. It's like people don't seem to want to make room for the intimacy of business relationships, connection. That's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you just say something that can be answered in a yes or no, it's not, you're not.
You've ticked the box, haven't you? You've ticked the box, you've moved on. I've asked, you've answered. Let's move on to kind of what we came to have the conversation with. And again, I think, like, this year for me more than anything has definitely highlighted the need for that greater connection. I know I can be, again, coming back to the kind of overachieving stuff and the high performing stuff, I know that I don't always come across as the most caring, as the most open, all of those sorts of things. Sometimes, particularly if it's an email, like you might, hi Kelly, how are you? Like, there might be lots of niceness in there, but then you'll ask me a question at the end. My default is just to answer that question. I then have to remember sometimes to put in the human side of it.
Right.
Right. It's, been really lovely to hear from you. I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that. Do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to pick that up? All of those sorts of things. Because sometimes if you've asked me a question, sometimes that can be my default. So and I can answer that in a word or a sentence.
Yeah.
I know sometimes that I can forget the niceness, because when it's written and all of those sorts of things, I just want to go into solution mode. I want to get it answered, and I want to move on. In a conversation, I genuinely want to know how you are. I'm not going to ask you a question if I don't want to know the answer to it.
Yeah. No, it's important to self-reflect, like you're saying. None of us are perfect at any of these things. I'm sure I've said still or yet to someone this year, and not intentionally. The point is catching it, recognizing it, and trying to work on it. Because you're right, we have power in the emails we send, we have power in the phone calls we have, in the Zoom calls we have, to make someone feel heard and valued, or to make someone feel more alone. And it's in 2020, I personally am hoping that we're creating a place where people feel safe if we keep using language that just puts a wall up.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right, what do you have next?
So I've just got now my list of words. So I think 2 that I want to just kind of eradicate completely, actually. One of them is should.
Yeah, I have should.
There we go. And we've probably got lots of similar ones as well. But one of them is should, and one of them is busy.
Yep. Okay.
And
good.
so we'll start with the busy. I think we have got to a point, and we got to a point pre-lockdown, where busy had become a badge of honor.
Yeah.
The same as stress. I'm so stressed this week because I'm so busy, and I'm so busy next week, and I'm so busy next week, and I'm so busy next week.
Yeah.
And busy really for me doesn't mean anything. I want to know, are you productive? Yes, you may have a lot on. Yes, you may be working too hard, but again, let's unpick that through a conversation. I'm so sick of hearing how busy everybody is. I want to hear what you've achieved. What's been your success? Where have you got to? How productive have you been? What goals have you achieved? I genuinely want to know. I'm so sick of busy, right? Busy, a bit like kind of good, okay, and fine. Busy says nothing.
I wanted to ask you because, if not everybody knows this, Kelly's company has 4-day work weeks, which I think is incredibly progressive, and ideally everyone will get on board with this in the next 10 years.
Let's hope.
But I remember when I launched my business 7 years ago, it's funny the conversations you can picture. I was at a happy hour with a friend who worked at an investment bank, and there was another either recruiter, or I don't know who she was really, but she's picture a very type A New Yorker businesswoman, and she came up to me and said, "So you must be working so much more now that you have a business." And I wasn't, because the whole point was that I wanted to have flexibility and maybe not work 10, 12 hours a day, right? So I was like, oh, well, no, I mean, that's why I resigned and started, not the only reason, but certainly a perk of starting my own business is that I can. And she's like, well, no, I mean, you must be hustling so much harder. And she was really pushing me on it. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to yoga every day at lunchtime, and I'm stopping my day at 5 p.m. And I remember being shamed sort of in how I was answering it. That seemed so odd to her. And 7 years later, I can picture it like it was yesterday. I should ask my friend Diana, who was there, if she remembers it as well. But I just was shocked. And I think, so I'm wondering, when you did the 4-day work week, if you got some pushback on that also, just oh, how do you?
Yeah, and I get, and even before that. So again, from maybe 2 years into starting the business, I remember having a conversation with somebody who was actually a business coach. Now, I'd met her at a networking event. We were just having some conversations, and she called me for a catch up one night and was asking about all of the stuff that I was working on. And I was talking about some of the courses that we were creating. I was talking about a book that, one of the books that I was writing. I was talking about some of the conversations that I was having. And her response to that, well, business can't be very busy then if you've got the time to do all of that. I'd love to be able to get all my content together, and I'd love to be able to, write this book. And if you've got all of this spare time, but this was a business coach basically telling me that I couldn't be running a very successful business if I had time to be creating content and writing a book. It was like, no, I plan my time. So I'm not filling my time. I'm making sure that I'm doing the things that are adding the value. And when we went to 4-day week at the crew, like that was one of the things I think I can remember. And I know I think Sue's watching today, but I can remember when we first kind of broached it with the team, and like this kind of look of horror in that. So basically what you're telling us is that we now need to fit 5 days worth of work into 4 days. It was like, no, that's not what we're saying, because actually we need to strip out. So we looked at the stuff that wasn't adding value. We looked at the stuff that wasn't working for us. We looked at improving systems. We looked at all of these things, because it wasn't about cramming 5 days work into 4 days. It was about having 4 days as productive time, doing away with the stuff that we didn't need to be doing, and just making things better from there. And that was how we looked at it, and that's what we've continued to do. If I could get Sue, I remember the look of horror. Like if we could do it all and be successful in 3 days, I'd do 3 days. I think we've just got to look at what makes us more productive.
Yeah.
And
we're measuring it wrong. People always ask me that, like, how many hours do you work a week? And like, it's like they're measuring productivity in a way that's not useful. And I never answer it. I'm always like, frankly, it's none of your business. My work gets done the way I want it to get done.
Exactly. But if the measures were, I don't know, money-based, client-based, value-added based, whether it's speaking opportunities, whether it's clients, whether it's whatever. Okay, Laura, how many, or even, conversations that you've had, Laura, how many value-added conversations have you had this week? Do you know, I've had 20 amazing conversations, and this has come out of it, and this has come out of it, and this has come out of it. Okay, do you feel it's been a productive week? Yes, it's been amazing. Where, how are you? Like, oh, I'm so busy this week.
I know.
So
and
busy
people are so miserable. Like, I don't talk to any busy people who are happy and engaged. When they're busy, they're so miserable. They're so cranky.
Yeah. So I want to see. Yeah. I want to see busy gone. Focus on outcomes. Focus on productivity. See that one.
On engagement, enjoy at work, all of that. Yep.
Absolutely. And then this should. And again, I think this is linked to some of the stuff that we were talking about last week in terms of this deserving and coming back to the still and just and all of those sorts of things. But I don't think and I know we've both been told that we should be doing things differently in our business. We should be trying new things. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. We should be doing that. It's like, no, we're doing what's right for us. I don't have to should do anything that I don't want to do. And if anybody's going to tell me that I should be or should not be doing something, it just irritates me. And I think we use that so often. Again, coming back to what we said at the beginning of the conversation in terms of our own self-talk, like, I should be working harder. I should be pushing more. I should be taking more time out for myself. I should be eating healthily. I should be getting more rest. I should be taking more breaks. I should. Like, no, forget the word should. And also I want to link to that. I'm just going to go on a total rant now, probably. But I also want to link to that try.
Yeah. Versus
because
do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said to somebody the other week, I was like, it's not try. We either do or we don't. And then it's like, it's like a Star Wars analogy, like from a Yoda perspective, like do or do not, but there is no such thing as try.
True. It's totally true.
And so I think, so should, try, and busy, get rid of them.
So I'm going to bring us full circle, because the reason should bothers me so much is it's usually used, like you said, to disempower. I hear it used to disempower each other. And it often comes after the how are you, which we just talked about. So it might go like this, like, how are you? Oh, I'm really having a rough week. Oh, well, you should take a break. You should do yoga. And as soon as I hear it, I'm like, whoa, like, you're disempowering that person to know what's best for them. I love giving advice when I'm asked for it, but I'd really I don't give it, or I try not to give it when I'm not asked for it. So, like, someone this morning on Twitter messaged me like, oh, I'm struggling to remember to breathe. And, kind of coming to me for some insight. And I said, well, I would recommend I like to do yoga on YouTube. You can find some breathing exercises. And sometimes I tell myself the word exhale and it really reminds me. And she's like, oh, that's so helpful. Thank you. But I never said you should go on YouTube and find a yoga class, right? This is what I recommend, what works for me, what I have found, what is helpful to me. So we just have to be thoughtful about, like, especially in HR, sometimes we just say like, oh, you should do X, instead of like, what would it look like if you did X, or how would it feel if you did X, or what works for me, or what I have found, or what others have found. It's an interesting, should all of a sudden becomes really shaming and very judgy and like, if I said to you, you should unpack all your boxes, if you already felt pressure to do that wouldn't have helped you. And even if I said you should give yourself time not to unpack the boxes, you're going to do it anyway because you know yourself. It doesn't work. I can say I'm here for you if you feel exhausted. I know how you're going to do it, and you might get tired.
Yeah. But again, and the point that you just made there about, as HR professionals, I think we are very quick to, and this is where we become the handholders. This is where we become disempowered ourselves, because people come to us for advice. We don't coach them through it. We don't ask them what solution.
Right.
Again, I'm doing what I said I didn't like doing and putting everybody in the same box. But on the whole, we're not coaching, we're not supporting, we're not developing, we're not trying to help people come up with their own solutions. We are referring them to policies. The policy says that you should do this, you should do that, you should try this, you should go away and think about this, you should. And again, I think sometimes that's where a lot of the issues come from within the business, because we are giving directives through the should method. And because that's not working for people, or that's not the right solution for them, they don't go away and do it because they don't feel it's the right thing to do. And it's not what they would do if they'd have been able to come up with their own solution. So they ignore what we're telling them anyway. And then we end up with a different problem weeks or months later down the line. And then we go back to, HR are like, well, you should have listened to me. You should have listened to me when you came. And it's like, well, no, because actually you weren't necessarily helping me. Yeah. You were just telling me what I should be doing based on a policy.
Yeah. The more we get self-aware as leaders and as women and as HR professionals, talent acquisition professionals, I think the more self-aware we become, the easier it is for us to realize that we can't should people into behavioral changes.
No, absolutely not.
It doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for them. We can recommend. We definitely should brainstorm. We definitely should talk it through. But it needs to be done in a way where the word choice isn't just, oh, that's why you didn't, do this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Give us one final word. Give us one final word and then we'll wrap up.
I know. I was just like, we got so much in here. Yeah, I think I feel good. I wrote down, I don't understand, which I think is along the lines of I can't imagine. I don't understand how people could do that. Just work on actually understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose one final one then that I would like to close with, and again, this is something that we spoke about last time. It's this word deserve.
Yeah.
So that we linked back, didn't we, to taking time out, to having a day off, to all of those sorts of things. It's like we feel we have to earn something before we feel we deserve to take a break.
Yep.
And I think more so now than ever again, with where we are globally, with where we are individually, we don't have to deserve self-care, time out, putting ourselves first. We already are worthy of it. We already deserve it. We don't have to earn it in order to then feel that we have to reward ourselves with it at the end.
Yeah, perfect. I hope someone feels heard watching this and realizes we have power in what we say to each other.
So do I. And what we say to ourselves.
Yeah, most importantly.
Absolutely. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Where can people find you?
Yes, find me on Twitter and Instagram at Eastside Staff, Laura Mazzullo on LinkedIn, and YouTube at Learn with Laura HR.
Perfect, thank you.
We'll see you in
And
2
you
weeks.
can, yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks. You can find me again, Twitter. Laura's like mad active on Twitter. Every time I go on there, like there's 10,000 tweets from Laura, and I'm like, oh, I can't keep up. But Laura is very active on there. I'm on there, but not so much. So Kelly Swingler. And then Coaching People Leaders on Instagram and Kelly Swingler on LinkedIn. Laura and I will be back for another conversation in 2 weeks' time. What are we talking about in 2 weeks?
Imposter syndrome.
Yay.
Exciting. See you then.
See you then. See you in 2 weeks. Take care for now. Bye, bye, bye.